I want to welcome you all back to the second installment of the Women in Agile 2020 online global conference. You are here. We are at a very special presentation. Those of you who have attended a Women in Agile in-person conference in the past know that historically in this middle section, we've done lean coffee, open space. We've done something that tries to get you all engaged, talking to each other. And we did a lot of work on what kinds of things could we adapt to an Agile format or to an online format. Could we do breakout rooms? Could we do something else? And from the very beginning, the human that I knew I wanted to drive that effort was April Jefferson. And as a direct result of just what is going on in the world and around us, we really felt that it was an unprecedented opportunity to bring in and elevate the voices of women who have historically not been on center stage with us and to understand kind of their experiences. So we're going to get to that in a minute. Before we do that, I do have a little bit of housekeeping. Then I'm going to say more nice things about it. As a reminder, our conference code of conduct and our Women in Agile code of conduct is on the Women in Agile site. I want to remind especially and refresh for anybody who may be joining us at this phase of the conference for the first time that we are seeking to create a safe and inclusive space for all of you. And so if anything happens that detracts from the safety or the inclusiveness of the space for you, we want to try to support and help you. Whether that is something that we need to take action with another human about, or if it's really just about talking about your needs and sharing kind of what makes this conference more effective for you. We in the Women in Agile community and other underrepresented communities, we know that oftentimes when we go into these majority dominated spaces, our needs aren't being thought about and aren't being centered. And so we want to elevate that conversation and make sure that all of you feel like you are showing up and getting the best out of today that you can. So please do use the channels on Slack and other communication channels to talk to us about how this has been for you and what we can do better. So, okay, so I tweeted the other day, there's a really extraordinary blog post, very recent, about a concept that I have not fully investigated, and I haven't subjected it to academic rigor, but it was an idea that resonated with me. I'm kind of old school, and I remember the days when Alison Bechdel invented the Bechdel test for movies. And the idea is that the movie, you can think of a movie as inclusive of women if a movie includes two named female characters who talk to each other about something other than a man. And the number of extraordinary movies that fail that test is eye-opening. Recently, I saw a blog post that echoes the idea to me of the Bechdel test, and it is called the Althea test. And it was a simple test that you can apply to your organization to determine, are you as inclusive in terms of diversity as you think you are, as you would like to be? And the test goes roughly like, you go to a VP, senior level. I don't mean regular managers. You go to senior level people in your organization and say, can you name 2 Black women individual contributors in your organization and what they are working on, what they have contributed to your organization, and what their career goals are? And can you see them doing your job? And if the answer to any of those things is no, then you have work to do. And what I thought was so meaningful about that is the idea that none of us is included unless all of us is included. As historically, white feminism has frequently worked really hard to elevate the rights and experiences and inclusion of white women. And then a number of people will drop off of the effort once they start to feel like white women have gotten what they were looking for. And we don't always remember to look outside of that lens and to see, what about other women? What about other underrepresented genders? Who have we left behind? Are we going to bring them up with us? Somebody brought us up. Are we going to pay that forward? And so the opportunity to hear from Black women in the Agile community who are doing that work, doing amazing things, and to understand how does that affect our community as a whole, and what does that teach us about how we can help be more inclusive even as we are fighting to be included. And when I say we, I'm a white lady, you know? So to that end, I wanted to introduce, again, one of my other favorite humans, April Jefferson. I love the fact that her Twitter handle and her personal brand is Soul Craftswoman, because that's a feeling that I get when I spend time with April. I had an extraordinary experience at the Women in Agile Open last year, where April really worked to create a space that was both inclusive and so nourishing and just so enriching for all of us that were there. It was really a unique experience. April is also the co-creator of the Tabi game and does some just extraordinary work in so many different wings of the Agile community. And she has helped us assemble this talk and panel that she is going to facilitate. I'm going to hand it over to you. And yeah, inspire us. And thank you.
So we're going to begin our Black Women's Lens segment with Yolanda Hughes. And Yolanda is a proud native of the South, specifically Alabama. She was raised there in the 60s and the 70s and gives a unique lens on what we know as a global conversation. It's not limited to the US. She is, of course, is a world traveler, and whether for pleasure or for work, she held many positions in government as well as corporate America. What I love so dearly about Yolanda is that code switching is not a part of how she shows up. She's self-confident as a Black woman, and as she states, since 1984. So you'll have to talk to her more about that. And I just want to say I'm elated to have her. Today she's going to lead us in adapting and leaning in to hearing and amplifying our voices. So here's Yolanda Hughes.
Colleen, I can't share my screen.
Miss Cheryl, would you stop sharing, please?
Thank you. No, it's still host disabled.
Hang on just a moment.
It's all good. It's all good. Hey, everybody. I was going to say, hey, y'all, but based on the chat, I thought I wouldn't do that.
Hey.
So it should be working now, Yolanda?
Okay, it is. Thank you. Hold on.
You're very welcome.
Share computer sound. Hopefully this is going to work.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine,
Good afternoon. I am Yolanda Hughes, and I'd like to welcome everybody to a conversation around the theme of adapting with the Black lens on our lean in flavor. I want to focus on the claiming of our space while also encouraging the amplifying and the highlighting of our voices. I'm going to lean a little bit on Corey's talk, and I'm going to describe myself for you using language. I am unapologetically Black. Oops, sorry. I didn't want that to go forward. Thank you. I'm an African American. I'm an American descendant of slaves. My birth certificate says I'm a Negro. I'm an agilist. I'm a change agent. I'm a social and racial justice warrior. I've looked like an engineer for 34 years. I'm a believer in lifting up communities and a believer in supporting the current Black Lives Matter moment. Today, I'm here with my team, and we're going to present a wrap-up of our ADAPT and Lean In PI planning session. Our session achieved its goals, even though the conversations and sessions and discussions were a little bit uncomfortable, they were real. I just want to add, if your racial and social justice conversations are comfortable, you probably need a new conversation, okay? Allow me to introduce my team. I have Angela Rye, Maya Angelou, Shirley Chisholm, James Baldwin, Angela Davis, and Michelle Obama. Our end in mind is to communicate through music, voices, and focus on areas in the country and focus that the Agile community in America can use in adapting to the new and changing American normal and landscape. Specifically, how to effectively lean in to listen and to hear our voices. There are going to be a few challenges, probably already have been, for your hearts, minds, and spirits, and your soul, to what you think you know. Be open to what you hear is all I ask. If it's new, write it down, research it, and Google it. If you don't believe in, agree with, or understand what I'm saying, that's okay too. All I ask is that you open yourself to a perspective that might not be yours and be open to hearing about the systemic and prevailing issues that Black women, not only in this industry, but in this world, face every day. I do not represent all Black women. We're not a monolith. Because of our 400 years of oppression and the second-class manner in which we've been treated, we bring and carry many different perspectives, personas, looks, styles, voices, hues, religious beliefs, demeanors, flares, educational backgrounds, and countries of origins, just to name a few. I also, as an aside, want to say this really is not new, y'all. This has been going on for 400 years.
Existed for Indigenous people, for Black people, and for all people of color. And I can tell you for certain in my history books, thank God for my parents who taught me from the very beginning about the power of my Blackness and the importance of it in our mark in history dating before the transatlantic slave trade. And so when we talk about whiting out history, what has already happened is that there's been significant erasure from the beginning of time. So when you talk about these monuments and who American history has chosen to lift up as our heroes, what is the truth, Chris, is that some of these people are history makers, but they're no heroes of mine, right? And because they're history makers, the question is, do they belong in a book? Do they belong in a museum? Or should they be existed for Indigenous people?
While we may think we are adapting and thinking that we're not racist, and we think that we have Black friends, so this doesn't apply to me, you have to understand that you have to know our history to be able to help, improve, lead the change, participate in the change, and truly, truly understand where we are in this current moment. The strategy to get to equal so that our voices are heard, requested, and taken seriously, it's not new. The difference is the attention being paid to the lack of diverse Black voices, including women's Black voices. All I'm going to say is there's several sources. My sister likes to say, Google is your friend. Look it up. Take a little time to learn.
You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Just because I walk as if I have oil wells pumping in my living room. Just like
Allyship is real big right now in communities, in corporations, in employee resource groups, and etc. The challenge is, however, in order to be my ally, you have to understand me and accept me for who I am. Black women bring a lot of awesomeness into whatever space we occupy. Our presentation, our language, our style may not be what you're used to seeing, but if we can ever get to not focusing on the differences in the looks and just focus on the delivery from a Black woman and focus on the message, we can become allies. We have never needed anyone to help us assimilate to the world of whiteness. What we need is to adapt and lean forward with an understanding of our DNA. Emphasize with the fact that I am enough and just as good, just like I am.
I think it's precisely the kind of thinking that has gone on in this country, because a white male has always been the person who has entered into the White House. The fact that a black and a woman who also has a certain kind of following among some of the groups that these gentlemen address themselves to also, I don't see why it is that I should step back. We've never had a black person or woman to seriously run.
In the agile space and the community, we are represented in leadership, in networking, in training, in conferences, et cetera, even though we are very present in this profession. The lean is to adapt and evolve, to be able to not only be open to hearing our expertise, but be very conscientious about including us in discussions about everything, not just strategy, not just diversity, equity, and inclusion, but adapt, lean in, and include us in the creation of the activity, the meeting, the event, the challenge, the conference, the team, the C-suite, and even in stuff that you're doing in your neighborhoods. Music has always been integral to our heritage. It's how we share our stories. And my subject is very heavy, so I wanted to take a little pause right now and just share and get everybody's minds, you know, think a little bit, woosah for a moment before I jump back in and finish.
No unity, no power. White power for white people. Black power for black people. 1967. The Black Panther Party. The movement. Freedom.
Let's talk about freedom.
We will not bow down to no change for anybody else. We will not bow down to just like injustice.
And I'll share something with you guys on a little personal note. I almost started to rewrite this whole series, this whole speech, after the passing of John Lewis and C.T. Vivian on Friday. So I didn't want to redo it all, but I do want the larger community who isn't as inundated as I am in my community to understand that 95-year-old man and an 80-year-old civil rights pioneers died with America in the way that it is today. That brings me sadness. It just does, right? John Lewis has a hole in his head so I could vote, right? So I didn't change it, but I did add a male to my team just because.
The reason that black people are in the streets has to do with the lives they're forced to lead in this country. And they're forced to lead these lives by the indifference and the apathy and a certain kind of ignorance, a very willful ignorance on the part of their co-citizens.
James Baldwin is someone that I encourage everybody to write down and to read. I don't have anything to add to his voice. And if you read and listen to him, you'll understand. And remember, Baldwin spoke in the 60s, and his voice can explain why we're protesting today.
The mainstream feminist movement has made serious mistakes. You know, I often point out that when I wrote my
No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice.
Adapt and lean into understanding. Feminism has an intersection between women of all nationalities, races, and backgrounds. However, Black women are not represented as equals in technology leadership spaces when compared to white women and Southeast Asian women. In order to achieve true intersectionality and get our beings thought of as equal, some discomfort and hard conversations have to happen. Thus, the no justice, no peace. And I hope everybody realizes that's a little child out saying what's happening in our world.
When you were labeled that angry Black woman, was that one of the things that knocked you back a bit?
Well, that was one of those things that you just sort of think, dang, you don't even know me.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you just sort of feel like, wow, where'd that come from?
Yeah.
You know? And that's the first blowback, because you think, wow, that is so not me. But then you sort of think, well, this isn't about me. This is about the person or the people who write it.
Right.
You know? I mean, that's just.
This is something that most of us with Hughes like mine have heard. Part of my 12 minutes that I was allocated was to get your mind thinking about things that you may think about or maybe you've never thought about. As a part of our retrospective, what's not working is day-to-day business as usual. We need change. Tokenism doesn't work and has never worked. Lack of understanding of Black women doesn't work either, right? Stereotypes don't work. What will and can work is adapting what you think you know, leaning in and understanding our history, our culture, and our norms. Make a conscious effort to include us in every space. We want what the majority white race wants: peace, love, happiness, opportunity, and prosperity. The ask is that you give more of us a chance and that you widen your Black lens, hence the Black lens. I must admit, when Natalie did her opening and she acknowledged that there is work to do with respect to inclusion of Black voices, it warmed my heart. That's the first step. You got to acknowledge that there is a problem. I appreciate the Women in Agile for affording me this brief space. I thank the audience for your time, and I hope that I offered you a different perspective on what's happening.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be.
Thank you for your time, April.